Welcome back to part 2 of our episode diving deep into relationships, dating, and red flags with psychologist Meghan. If you enjoyed last week, you are going to want to take notes again this week. It is packed with goodness. If you missed last week's episode, I suggest you go back and listen to it at some point, but the 2 parts can be listened to separately. I have absolutely loved this chat with Meghan and have been sending it to all my friends, whether they are single or in relationships. Enjoy.
In your mind, you would think that you would be most attracted to the attachment style that is like yours, because I guess you would imagine that they would have the same expectations. Like, I think there's this idea like to avoidance. That's kind of what we term them. To avoidance would love to be in a relationship together because they wouldn't need anything from each other at all.
Hyper independent.
They'd just be like, oh yeah, you want to meet up for some dinner? Okay,
yeah,
cool. And that two anxious attachment styles could, meet each other at that level of intensity and they could like chat and talk. But interestingly, no, what the research shows us is that opposites are attracted to each other. And that's what makes for really tricky experiences because we don't go for what's functional, we go for what's familiar. So if you grew up experiencing, this kind of like unpredictability, this inconsistency, you're naturally going to go for that. Like if you are really anxious and then you kind of are met with this other person who's at that level, you'll be like, that doesn't feel familiar to me. And so, yeah, what we see is that naturally then they reinforce each other's attachment styles. So like someone who's got those anxious attachment behaviors for an avoidant, they would be like, oh, this just reinforces why relationships are not my thing. Like, this is so much work, and I believe relationships are too much work. And then for the, anxious attachment style person, they're like, they're going to leave me because look how absent they are. And they want to be separate from me all the time. Why do they want to be so separate from me? I guess I better ramp these up. So we see that they really keep the cycle going. So it's really tricky. There isn't necessarily like a better attachment style for you in terms of anxious avoidant. Of course, if you can get a secure attachment person in there, then we'll know that makes the biggest difference. So if you experience, anxious, avoidant or fearful attachment styles and you can find a secure attachment person, you will feel enormous relief. You will be able to then talk about what we talk about as developing an earned secure attachment. And I know that's kind of one of our next questions is around like, can you shift your attachment style? If you can have corrective experiences, yes, which is so nice. As a therapist, I'm like, So like if you can find a relationship with someone who brings in a secure attachment, you will have this experience of someone who's available, reliable, meets your needs, all of that. You'll be able to kind of really start to shift your expectations in the relationship dynamic and you'll earn that secure attachment style. And so you can do that in therapy, which is so beautiful. That can be your first experience of a secure attachment, which is, for a lot of people, particularly like my clients, they will be like, how will I ever find an experience of a secure attachment? How am I even meant to know what it looks and feels like? And so sometimes creating it in therapy can be the best thing you do for yourself. And so I'm a schema therapist and we talk a lot about reparenting, and that as your therapist, I'm going to give you limited reparenting in that I'm going to show you what it's like to have your emotional needs met, to be a predictable figure in your life, to be consistently, predictably available to you. And we can actually correct some of the emotional experiences you had when you were younger.
I love that.
Isn't it so nice?
That's so sweet. Do you find, I guess, as a parent or like reflecting on your own parents, do we often have the attachment style of our parent? Like if your parent is secure attachment style, do they pass that on because they show up that way in that relationship, but also the others as well? Like how does
Very
that?
much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So that's a really good question around how we were parented. It creates our attachment style. So then naturally how our parents were parented has created their attachment style. So it's so intergenerational, right, in that sense. And that absolutely, this isn't a blaming kind of game. We're not trying to point the fingers at our parents and be like, this is how you stuffed me up. This is now the attachment style I have, so thanks for that. Because absolutely, if they were never taught emotional responsiveness, how do they then bring emotional responsiveness into their parenting, which then has naturally left us with a lack of emotional responsiveness? So it's all influenced in terms of the skills available to us at the time that, I think now we're really lucky that therapy is so normalized. This type of work is so normalized, having access to this information, that was not a part of our parents' experience at all. I don't imagine they were listening to a podcast on attachment.
I actually Googled when did podcasts first come out, and it's great. It's like between the year 2000 and 2004.
There you go.
I don't think any of our parents, we're not that young.
I don't think so. Not in the 1980s, something they went just, I wonder what attachment style I might be bringing to my child. And so that's what I think is so beautiful about where things can be different for us, is that we're learning these things, we're better understanding our own attachment styles. We're then figuring out, okay, how do I do the work to become earned secure? And then if I've become an earned secure attachment styler, then I can then bring that into my parenting so that I have increased the likelihood of my child having a secure attachment. So this stuff isn't stuck. You're not, this isn't just you for the rest of your life, but do take ownership of it and do kind of say, I want that to be different. I'm not going to be the fourth generation of avoidant people who don't have relationships.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points in there that I really love. I think one is taking ownership of, okay, well, the past is the past. How do I want to show up and give this as a gift to my child? But then also not blaming our parents. I think, like we spoke about before, those first 3 years of our lives are so foundational. But I like the quote, be kind to your parents, it's their first time.
Oh, beautiful.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think what I've seen happen with a lot of people, they get a few pieces of self-awareness and then start to throw all the blame on their parents. And that's not helpful for anyone. And so I love that. Let's just draw a line in the sand, have compassion. Like there might be some conversations you want to have with your parents, but blaming them is not going to actually help your relationship with them or help them to grow. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, I think that balance of like do this work to better understand yourself. And yes, it does bring up a really natural amount of resentment towards our parents, which I think is just, it's okay and it's really valid. And then at the same time, don't sit in that victim mentality of like, this is all the things they never gave me. And I'm so angry at them and I'm going to stay stuck in that because that's not going to shift you forward in your relationships either. So that balance of like validate that things were missed and also what do I give myself now because I'm an adult and I do have access to these things in a really beautiful way nowadays. What can I give myself that will be different?
Yeah. And that intergenerational sort of, you can't just blame your parents without looking at how, like you said, how they were parented and how their parents were parented. Like it's so layered and complex.
Yeah. Develop empathy for them too, right? The things they didn't get to.
Yeah.
And for a lot of our parents and then their parents, they were in really extreme trauma environments. So what we have to, bring into that is that for a lot of them, they were surviving, operating in a really different part of their brain than what we might be operating from, where we're able to be like, I can sit and talk to my child for 20 minutes around the tantrum and why they were crying. And I can do that. I have that. That's a beautiful privilege I can bring into my parenting. For another person, they didn't have that. They had to immediately leave and go to work because they might be the only single parent. Like there's just so many facets to it. I won't go into it. So,
Yeah, and then also having that compassion for ourselves that we can do all the work. And like you said, even as a psychologist, you're very aware, but still going to do things to our future children that are not right. But it's how we then like acknowledge that, show up and repair and move forward. And
Oh, yeah. My son will be probably on his own podcast one day saying like, let me tell you what it's like to have a psychologist mother.
I look forward to listening. Yeah. Speaking of blaming other people, it's easy to blame others when we're dating or in relationships for the things that are going wrong. But when we want to take some personal accountability, is there some baggage or things that we might be subconsciously showing up to relationships with that we should be aware of, or maybe even clear and feel lighter before we even start dating? Is there anything that's top of mind that you think our listeners would want to hear?
Well, yes, I
need
think
to hear.
Need to hear.
Maybe don't want to hear, but like some real talk. What do we need to hear?
You're the problem. It's you. No, definitely not. Absolutely. No matter who we are, like we were talking about before, no matter how much awareness we have, no matter the amount of work we've done, 100% we all are going to be bringing in our own set of beliefs into a dynamic, because that is absolutely expected and human. So yes, I do think what we've done today is like naming your attachment style and then how you might make sense of behaviors from that attachment lens, what your attachment wounds are. That's kind of the language you use around attachment theory. That's going to give you so much onus and control over the things that typically are triggering you in your dynamic, and also the behaviors that are not necessarily helpful to you. You know, like if we're thinking of an anxious attachment style, the excessive reassurance seeking and the over-the-top checking in and the excessive messaging, you know, if those are behaviors you exhibit, they feel real to you and they feel helpful to you, but they're not helpful to the dynamic. They likely are reinforcing this kind of feeling of the person wanting to pull away. I need space. This is suffocating me. So your awareness of what you need to feel better might not actually be what the relationship needs, and then exploring how do I gain security and reassurance in a way that actually works for us together, rather than these kind of over-the-top behaviors. But it also does bring me kind of to the notion of schemas. Like I mentioned before, I'm a schema therapist, and schema work is very much based on attachment theory. And it talks a lot about that. Obviously, these early developmental experiences we have, they naturally give us these attachment styles, but then from that, we also develop a set of schemas about ourselves. And they're maladaptive in nature in that they're not necessarily positive schemas or helpful schemas about ourselves. But again, it's how we made sense of our experience, and then we bring them in, and they're the lens that we, you know, move through life. And so some typical schemas that we might see for, you know, like the cohort of women that we've been talking to, high achieving, really driven, they might bring schemas into it like unrelenting standard schema. Or they might bring into it, you know, like the defectiveness shame schema, that under all of this, I have to work so bloody hard because I'm actually quite defective. There's something wrong with me deep down inside. Or you might bring the abandonment schema, which is kind of what we were talking about before, which is like deep down inside, I know this person will leave me at some point. So if you have those schemas, you're going to be playing them out, right? And so that's kind of the piece where you want to be like, okay, I do X, Y, Z when I'm in a relationship with someone and I don't like it. Like I see it and it doesn't feel great, but I really feel like I can't change it. I can't fix it. I don't know how to stop doing it. That's likely a schema-driven behavior. So knowing your schemas and then what behaviors and copings it brings out in you will change the way that you date and engage with a person in a relationship.
And are there some links we can put in the show notes to help people discover their schema?
Yeah,
or
totally.
Schemas, sorry. Yeah. There's multiple, yeah.
Yeah, there's multiple. And almost all of us have, you know, a good solid 18 schema, maladaptive schemas. That's just expected. Yes, there's definitely, again, online assessments, but schema work is probably best done in a therapeutic setting.
Okay.
But there's some great books that can also just get you started to think about them, what your schemas are, naming your schemas, and little plug, I've got schema cards.
I've seen these on Instagram. They look beautiful.
Yeah, we did. We put a lot of time into making them feel like really accessible to the average person, that they could kind of, because it's very very psychologically like intense language that can come from this therapy, but just kind of saying, okay, what's the schema name? What are the thoughts that come from it? What emotions come from it? Little graphics. And then on the back of our cards, we've talked about like healthy adult responses, which is, again, meeting the need in a really corrective way. So yeah, absolutely. Just kind of building those little tools into your life. You'll probably be able to, even just when it comes to like a relationship, be able to be like to your partner, actually, I think that might be my like abandonment schema coming out. Like, I know you said you're going away for the weekend, and a part of me is just like, how could you? That feels and sounds like my abandonment schema. Can we talk about that?
Labels and having a shared language is so helpful in a relationship. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I know I do a lot of work with corporate teams and individuals on sort of the flip side, Clifton Strengths, and looking at how we naturally think, feel and behave, and the positive sides. But there's, like everything, there's a light and a dark of those as well. But I know my partner and I, we use our strengths as a shared language as well. And like sometimes we have quite opposite ones, and something that will be lighting me up will cause stress to my partner and vice versa. So yeah, I love that. We can't talk about relationships without talking about breakups.
Yep.
If breakups suck, like they do. If someone's just been through a breakup and is wanting to fast forward through that healing phase and be ready to date again, is there anything they can do to fast track it, or do we just need to sit in it?
Sit in it.
I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, do not do that. Do not try fast track it. Do not jump into something new. That terrible, terrible advice around like just jump into something new to get over the old thing, said in, I think, a less polite way, is really unhelpful because, I think you really have to feel it and process it and grieve what you have lost in order to feel like you've appropriately closed that chapter. So loss, even if it's loss of a relationship, still requires grief processing work, and that is moving through all those different phases that come with it. It's a lot of oscillating between like, oh my gosh, I can't be without this person, to actually there's little moments where I feel really great that I'm going to be on my own and this might be really positive for me. It's so chaotic in that way where you're going to be jumping between the two all day, every day. Mm-hmm. That's where the healing will occur for you. So the more chaotic it feels, the better, which is quite
refreshing because breakups do just like no matter how driven you are in your work and your fitness and everything, like they're just so distracting and they just throw everything up in the air. Yeah.
They do. And that's it. Like, I think there's this idea of like, people are like, oh, you're doing so well. Like, you just seem like you're not even sad about it anymore. That's not necessarily a positive, whilst also at the same time really being quite absorbed in it, not able to still function in other parts of your life, not able to still connect with the positives in the future isn't good for you either. So in grief work, we do talk about like you can't be loss orientated all the time and you can't be future orientated all the time. You have to oscillate between loss and future. It's actually the oscillating between the loss and the future that's the best work you can be doing. So that's like if you're feeling fine and you're going about your day and then a song pops up on the radio and it's like your guy's song. It was the song that reminds you of dating, like in your first kiss or something, really nostalgic and important to you. And then you're just suddenly back in the loss, right? And you're crying and you're experiencing it. That's great. That's actually the best thing for you. And then,
sorry, can we pause on that? Because I think everyone's thinking about different breakups in their life while you're saying this. Yeah. And that's really refreshing and a nice reminder because it's a very natural human emotion and great, psychologist approved. Like,
absolutely, have
you
the
are
cry.
Healing, have the cry,
Absolutely.
feel the feels. Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and even put the song on. Like, if you are being really avoidant about the breakup and grieving the loss, put the song on. Make yourself think about the loss of it. Experience the grief. Experience the sadness. Remember the good and sit in that for a minute or however long you do need, and then naturally kind of come out of it. And that's the important piece. And that's also like what I was saying before. Then if you're too stuck in the loss-orientated part where you can't get out of bed and you're just playing the song 17 times and rereading all your messages. That's not necessarily,
That's not good.
not blaming anyone.
We've all been there, but yeah, that's an unhealthy cycle. Call Meghan's team.
Yeah, that's not necessarily what you need either. That's when you then have to say, okay, I've got to limit this. Okay, so I'm going to pull myself out of, I'm not going to think about the relationship for the next 3 hours. I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to go see a friend. You got to create the space for both.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very helpful. You've done a lot of research throughout your career on psychology, a lot of reading. Is there a book that you think we all should have on our shelf or read at least once in our life?
Yeah, well, I mean, just particularly to this topic, I would say Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller is a great one, just because it speaks about it in really concrete terms, but it's particularly focused towards dating. So if that's the space you're in right now, that's a really nice one. It will go through the attachment styles. It talks about behaviors in dating dynamics. It talks about attachment pairings. So that's helpful. If you're looking more to do the schema work, Reinventing Your Life by Jeffrey Young is awesome, because then you can, get a sense of like, what are my schemas? What am I bringing into it? If you're in a relationship already, then Hold Me Tight by Susan Johnson is really good too. And that's more about like, what are the kind of behaviors you want to keep in your relationship, about emotional availability and feeling like you are being really attuned to your partner. So that's more like this emotionally focused therapy part of things.
What a great list. Thank you. Before we wrap up today, is there anything you wish more women knew?
I think the number one thing is that it's not too late, because I work with so many amazing women who, they have given the time to their career, and we are in a different space, nowadays, where that's really encouraged, and I think, hell yeah, it should be. And it's okay if like you're in your 30s or your 40s and you're just now thinking, I've got the space for this and the headspace for it, or I feel actually open to it now, before I didn't. Like, absolutely celebrate that. Like, you're definitely not too late in the game. You don't have to write this part off for yourself. I think you're probably bringing in some beautiful strengths because you have done this later. So please just keep yourself open to it, because it's not too late. You're not too much. You're not too old. All those terrible things society's telling you.
I love that. Meghan, thank you so much for joining my reset.
Thank you. It was wonderful.